In the heart of East Africa lies a country smaller than most of the world's major cities. A nation once shattered by one of the darkest tragedies of the 20th century. Yet today, it stands as one of Africa's most disciplined, capable, and surprisingly influential military forces. This is the story of how Rwanda, a country many once believed would never recover, built a modern military that the world did not see coming. A force respected by global peacekeepers, feared by insurgent groups, and studied by analysts trying to understand how a country with so little became capable of so much. To understand Rwanda's unexpected rise, we need to go back long before its modern strength, to the years following independence. In the decades after 1962, Rwanda was a fragile nation, struggling through cycles of political instability and ethnic tension. The military at that time was small, underfunded, and deeply divided. It wasn't built for war, strategy, or defense. It existed mostly as a political tool, loyal to whichever leader held power. The country was poor, isolated, and militarily insignificant. But history would deliver a test so severe that it would change the nation forever. By the early 1990s, Rwanda faced internal collapse. A civil war broke out in 1990 between the government and the Rwandan Patriotic Front, the RPF, a rebel group formed mostly by exiled Rwandans who had grown up outside the country. These fighters were not many in number, but they were different. Many had military training from neighboring nations, including Uganda. They had discipline, strategy, and a cause they believed in: the right to return home. The RPF entered the war outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a government with foreign support. But despite this, they moved with precision. They organized themselves efficiently, using mobility, intelligence, and unity as their main weapons. They weren't constrained by the political struggles that plagued the national army. They knew exactly what they wanted, and despite setbacks, they pushed on. Then came 1994, a year that would scar Rwanda forever. The genocide tore the nation apart, destroying communities, institutions, the economy, and every form of trust. Within just weeks, the country collapsed into unimaginable chaos. While the regular army fractured and leadership disappeared, the RPF fought to stop the killings and restore order. They were the only force capable of stabilizing the nation, and by July 1994, they had taken control and ended the violence. What emerged after the genocide was a country with almost nothing left. The military infrastructure was gone. Weapons were scattered or destroyed. Training academies had collapsed. There was no clear command structure. Rwanda was a failed state trying to breathe again. But this moment, as dark as it was, became the turning point. From 1994 onward, the new government realized something. If Rwanda ever wanted stability, if it ever wanted peace, if it ever wanted to prevent chaos from returning, it needed a military built on a completely new foundation. Not one based on political loyalty, not one based on fear, not one built for personal power. Rwanda needed a professional force, disciplined, united, and capable of protecting the country from internal and external threats. And so began one of the most surprising military transformations in modern African history. The new Rwandan military, renamed the Rwanda Defence Force, or RDF, started with values rarely seen in recovering countries. The first priority was discipline. Soldiers were trained not just to fight, but to behave ethically, follow strict rules, and operate under clear command structures. Corruption was rooted out. Ethnic divisions were banned. Recruits were told they were not defending a tribe, but a nation. Rwanda's leadership understood that a modern military requires more than weapons. It requires purpose, identity, and structure. That's why the RDF invested heavily in training. Officers were sent abroad to learn from established academies. Foreign partners were invited to train new units. Military education became central. Rwanda's soldiers learned strategy, logistics, peacekeeping standards, and community relations. Each generation of soldiers became more professional than the last. But training alone couldn't transform Rwanda into a regional force. The country needed real-world experience, and it gained that sooner than anyone expected. By the late 1990s, the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo spilled across the border. Armed groups hostile to Rwanda began using Congo as a safe haven. Some of them were responsible for the violence of 1994, and now they were reorganizing. Rwanda believed it could not afford to wait for danger to grow. The government made a strategic and controversial decision: intervene. Rwandan troops entered Congo with the objective of neutralizing hostile militias and securing the border. What surprised many analysts, however, was how effective Rwanda's forces were. Despite being vastly smaller than regional armies, Rwanda moved with speed and organization that caught larger forces off guard. Their ability to adapt to terrain, conduct coordinated operations, and maintain long supply lines shocked observers. Rwanda had become a formidable regional actor far sooner than anyone predicted. While the Congo conflicts were complex and often controversial, one thing became clear: Rwanda's military was no longer a small, inexperienced force. It had grown into a disciplined, strategic army capable of projecting power beyond its borders. But Rwanda's transformation didn't stop there. In the early 2000s, the country turned toward peacekeeping, and this is where its reputation reached the global stage. Rwanda began sending troops to United Nations missions, especially in Darfur, South Sudan, and the Central African Republic. Almost immediately, Rwanda gained a reputation for reliability. Their troops followed orders, protected civilians, built trust with communities, and maintained strict discipline. Other nations noticed. UN officials repeatedly referred to Rwandan troops as among the most effective peacekeepers in the field. Their performance earned respect internationally, but for Rwanda, it was also personal. Having experienced the consequences of the world failing to intervene in 1994, Rwanda saw peacekeeping not just as service, but responsibility. Back home, military modernization continued. Rwanda invested in logistics, communication systems, medical units, engineering brigades, and rapid deployment capabilities. It also developed specialized units for counterinsurgency and border security. What made Rwanda unique was not its size. It was the coherence and professionalism of its system. Every unit had purpose. Every soldier had training. Every mission had clarity. Unlike many countries where the military becomes a source of political chaos or corruption, Rwanda focused on discipline and accountability. Soldiers who violated rules faced consequences. Commanders were evaluated based on performance, not personal alliances. Equipment was maintained, budgets monitored, and strategic planning became long-term instead of reactive. International partners, from the US to European nations, began training with Rwanda more often, recognizing that its military model, small but effective, could serve as an example for others. Rwanda became known for developing high-quality soldiers rather than large numbers. And then came one more surprising chapter. Rwanda started deploying troops abroad not just under the UN, but through bilateral missions. In Mozambique, Rwandan forces were invited to help the government battle insurgents in Cabo Delgado. Once again, Rwanda moved quickly, organizing operations that pushed militants out of key areas. The mission shocked observers. Many wondered how a small nation could deploy, coordinate, and sustain operations thousands of kilometers away. But Rwanda proved it could. From a small, divided army at independence, to a devastated country with no functioning military in 1994, to one of Africa's most respected forces today, this rise was not an accident. It was built step by step, through discipline, training, strict rules, long-term planning, real combat experience, and a clear sense of national mission. Rwanda's military power is not based on sheer size. It is based on cohesion, professionalism, and the belief that national survival depends on readiness. Today, the Rwanda Defence Force stands as a symbol of how a nation can rebuild itself from almost nothing. Not through wealth, not through natural resources, and not through brute force, but through strategy, discipline, and purpose. In a world where many countries struggle to maintain stable military institutions, Rwanda's story is a reminder that power does not always come from size. Sometimes, the most unexpected nations rise the highest, simply because they choose to build differently,
and refuse to repeat the mistakes of their past.